I think it is a real, it's a gift, if you like, to Putin. He is the aggressor. He is the one who is murdering hundreds of thousands of people, his own ones as well as Ukrainians. And here he is coming to America for a visit with the President of the United States, at which the Ukrainians will not be present at all, to discuss the future of Ukraine.
We've been discussing it all morning, this developing story that the Ukrainian President Zelensky has said his country will not give land to the occupier, and that any solutions that exclude Ukraine in peace talks are against peace. We know that President Trump is planning to meet President Putin in Alaska on Friday, and there is discussion about land swaps. That is what President Trump is saying. Let's get the thoughts now on the assessment of Catherine Philp, the Times World Affairs editor, who is in Kyiv. Morning, Catherine.
Good morning.
So, first of all, tell us what you are hearing about this meeting and the involvement, because it sounded initially like the European leaders, Ukraine to some extent, were being sidelined. And now we're hearing about talks this weekend between all of those parties in the UK.
Yeah, well, this was a suggestion that came up when American officials were briefing Ukraine and some of the European allies on the results of these conversations between America and Russia. So it was really a proposition that came from that side of things. I don't think there's any confirmation whatsoever from Washington that they intend to have an American presence there. And I mean, I think things are just in such an early stage. This is an effort by Ukraine and the European allies to insert themselves into this process that they're being shut out of.
So in light of that, how is this news of this summit in Alaska being met in Kyiv?
Very, very negatively, as I think you would understand. I mean, certainly not only the fact that that Ukrainians are not involved, and so the whole idea of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine is being completely sidelined. The parameters of what is being suggested, which even now aren't clear, because Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff seem to have walked away from their conversations with the Kremlin with slightly different versions. Nonetheless, all those versions involve Ukraine ceding vast amounts of its territory. And those are demands from Moscow that haven't changed since Trump came into office. So as far as they're concerned, absolutely nothing has changed, except that Putin appears to have managed to play Donald Trump along now for 200 days, having said he would solve this in one day and then 100, only for him to agree to a meeting with none of the terms essentially changed.
I'm interested to know what the Ukraine position is. I mean, we spoke to Alexander Hara, who's a former advisor to the Foreign and Defence Ministries of Ukraine earlier on. And he was saying that there is no diplomatic solution to this war. Ukraine will give up no territory. And if Europe fully backs Ukraine, then they can absolutely beat Russia. I mean, one, do you think that's realistic? And two, is that the line that you're hearing from Zelensky? Or is that just their starting point for negotiations?
I certainly haven't heard the attitude that there's no diplomatic solution, because, in fact, I mean, Zelensky himself has admitted that in the case certainly of Crimea and possibly some of the other territories, that only a diplomatic solution could return those to Kyiv's control. I mean, I think that Kyiv feels that with the appropriate support, it can hold the line that it's got at the moment. But no, I don't think they're under any illusion that it will take negotiation of some degree, and probably following a considerable military beating on the field for Russia to hand over those territories. But nobody sees Putin doing that very willingly, and they are aware that they're going to have to fight all the way to get him in the kind of corner in which he would be willing to do that. And most people see that as actually that would happen through essentially the worldwide blockage of Russian oil sales. So not only massive secondary sanctions on countries that buy it, but also the paralyzing of the Russian shadow fleet that takes this oil around the world in defiance of existing sanctions.
Catherine, it's always good to get your assessment. Thank you so much for coming on. It's Catherine Philp there, the Times World Affairs editor. We speak now to Sir Peter Westmacott, who is a former UK ambassador to the US. Good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning, Chloe.
Do you think just by having a meeting between Trump and Putin on US soil that this is essentially rewarding Putin when we're hearing from Ukraine they have no intention whatsoever of ceding any territory?
Well, there is a certain irony on about this meeting taking place on American territory, which was, of course, bought from Russia for $7 million back in, I think, 1867, and was regarded as a folly at the time, but subsequently regarded as a move of geostrategic brilliance. So here we have Putin coming to what was once upon a time Russian territory. Maybe he's going to ask Donald Trump to give it back, but even for Putin, that might be a bit too much to ask. I think it is a real, it's a gift, if you like, to Putin. He is the aggressor. He is the one who is murdering hundreds of thousands of people, his own ones as well as Ukrainians. And here he is coming to America for a visit with the President of the United States, at which the Ukrainians will not be present at all, to discuss the future of Ukraine. On the substance, I keep hearing from Russian friends, oligarchs and others, that Putin thinks that time is on his side, that the West will get fed up with supporting Ukraine, that he doesn't care how many thousands of people he kills in the process, that he can play this long. And I think he's probably spinning this out for as long as he can, and as long as everybody else is prepared to stay in the conflict. And he thinks that he's got much more staying power than the Ukrainians have, and he's offered nothing in the way of a concession. Earlier on, there was talk from Zelensky about territorial swaps, but in his latest remarks to the prospects for this meeting in Alaska, he has said that Ukraine is not prepared to make any territorial concessions whatever. So it's pretty hard to see substance coming out of this, other than giving Putin the opportunity to show that he's in the game with the President of the United States and not under any real pressure to make concessions.
And what about Europe's role in this? Because apart from Ukraine being frozen out from these talks, it very much looks like Europe and European leaders are being frozen out, which in itself is interesting because Trump for so long was saying, well, Europe, you need to step up and pay for this war. You need to be offering security guarantees. You need to come up with a plan. And yet, once again, he's now saying, well, actually, I'll just sort this out with Putin. Do you think there is any role for Europe in this, in the US's eyes?
Well, there's been plenty of comment about how this is a latter-day Yalta, or if you want to go back a couple of thousand years, you can go back to some of the Greek philosophers who claimed that the world had to be run by a small number of very great men in charge of very large countries, and the rest of us could go hang. I think Putin and President Trump both are people who think that big boys in the playground should tell the others what to do, and that the world's affairs should be organized between them, the two of them, plus I suppose they would include Xi Jinping, the president of China. So this is, in a sense, part of the worldview of the two of them. Neither has been very keen to involve the Europeans. This was also the case over the way in which Donald Trump has dealt with Israel and Iran not long ago. The Europeans were in the middle of negotiations about a possible diplomatic, at least, stand down with Iran when bombs away and the attacks took place. So I think the Europeans, you're right, are marginalized. But the problem is that whatever solution there is, or indeed if there isn't a solution, the Europeans are going to be the ones who are there supporting either a ceasefire or Ukraine as it continues to defend the integrity of its own country against the Russian invader, because it's by no means clear that the United States of America will stay in the fight. Recently, Trump has been talking a bit more optimistically, perhaps, about, from our point of view, about sticking with the Ukrainians and getting fed up with the way in which he's been played by Putin. But now we seem to be in a different mood. And the Europeans, as you rightly say, are not actually in the game and not in the room where it's going to happen, if indeed anything does happen.
Thank you so much for coming on. Good to get your analysis. That's Sir Peter Westmacott, former UK ambassador to the US.